Kamala Harris was no stranger to busy schedules. As the Vice President of the United States, her days were filled with meetings, speeches, and trips across the country. But today, she decided to take a rare day off. Leaving her office, she thought, I just want to enjoy a simple, ordinary day. Dressed casually in a beige sweater, jeans, and her trusty sneakers, Kamala looked no different from any other ordinary woman. She skipped the security entourage and brought along just one close aide, who kept a discreet distance to avoid drawing attention. Her destination was a suburban shopping mall where she hoped to blend into the crowd, find a little relaxation, and pick up a few small items. The mall was bustling and lively. Families strolled around, children laughed and played, and adults crowded into fashion stores. No one recognized Kamala Harris, or if they did, they only thought she looked like someone familiar, and that was exactly what she wanted. A bit of anonymity in the crowd. Kamala wandered through the shops, stopping to admire Christmas decorations. She smiled softly as she saw a family helping their daughter try on a wedding dress. The scene brought back memories of her own childhood with her mother. For Kamala, these everyday moments always carried a sense of warmth, reminding her why she entered politics in the first place: to make a positive difference in the lives of ordinary families. As Kamala walked past a high-end fashion boutique, her attention was caught by a deep blue long coat displayed in the window. The coat looked elegant yet understated, perfectly matching her style. Without hesitation, she stepped into the store. Inside, the boutique exuded luxury with its warm golden lighting and meticulously arranged displays. The staff stood poised, ready to assist customers. However, as Kamala approached a display table to inquire about the price, the expression of a young employee, likely in his early 20s, betrayed a hint of disdain. The employee, a blond young man with a cold demeanor, approached her with a forced smile. "Hello," he said, his tone laced with reluctance. "How can we help you?" Politely, Kamala pointed to the coat and asked, "I'd like to know the price of this coat." The employee's eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her slightly worn sneakers and simple outfit. A smirk tugged at his lips. "That coat is very expensive. Perhaps you'd have better luck at the store across the way." The pointed remark felt like a dagger to Kamala's pride, but she remained composed. "I'm just asking for the price," she replied, keeping her tone calm. The employee sighed and shook his head. "I don't think this coat is for you. It's a premium item, designed for people who, let's say, have high-paying jobs." His voice carried an unmistakable note of condescension and discrimination. Kamala met his gaze directly, feeling her anger rise, but instead of reacting with outrage, she simply nodded and said, "Thank you. I think I understand." She walked out of the store, a mixture of hurt and disappointment weighing on her. What Kamala didn't realize, however, was that the entire interaction had been recorded by another customer in the store. As Kamala left the store, a strange heaviness lingered in her heart. Racism, this was nothing new to her. She had faced it her entire life. From being a young girl of color growing up in an Indian and Jamaican family to stepping into the world of politics, a field riddled with prejudice. But something felt different this time. The other customers had witnessed the incident, and many couldn't stay silent. An elderly woman in a worn floral dress approached her and said, "I'm so sorry for what you just went through. He shouldn't have spoken to you like that." Nearby, a group of young people, their faces marked with surprise, whispered among themselves. One of them said, "Doesn't she look like Vice President Kamala Harris?" Kamala simply smiled and shook her head. "It's all right. Thank you for your kindness." She continued walking, determined not to let the day be completely ruined. What she didn't anticipate, however, was that the video recorded during the encounter would quickly make its way onto social media. Within hours, social media was flooded with videos capturing Kamala being subjected to discrimination. Posts and comments began to pour in. "Shameful. Is this how we treat our vice president?" Kamala Harris just experienced what millions of people of color face every day. We need to change this. The video quickly garnered millions of views. Kamala's identity was confirmed, and the incident became the center of public attention. Several celebrities voiced their support for her. A Black actress wrote, "Kamala Harris is a symbol of resilience. She remained composed in a situation where many others would have struggled." Another politician shared, "This story isn't just about Kamala Harris. It highlights an issue that anyone in a minority community could face." However, not everyone sided with Kamala. Some criticized her. "This is being blown out of proportion. It's just a young employee behaving poorly. No need to make it a big deal." Kamala Harris shouldn't use her status to pressure working-class individuals. The story quickly spiraled out of control. Even the shopping mall didn't anticipate that what seemed like a minor incident would turn into a massive media storm. For Kamala, however, this was more than just a viral controversy. It marked the beginning of a larger journey, a mission to drive change inspired by the wounds she had experienced firsthand. After the video went viral, the shopping mall quickly descended into chaos. They received thousands of critical comments across social media platforms, from Twitter to Facebook. News outlets and television programs began covering the incident, intensifying the pressure. In response, the mall's management held an emergency meeting to address the crisis. Ethan, the employee responsible for the incident, received a call from his manager as soon as he arrived at the store the next morning. He was summoned to the office, where the manager informed him that he was being terminated immediately. "We cannot tolerate discriminatory behavior in this store," the manager said firmly. Ethan tried to defend himself, saying he didn't realize who Kamala Harris was, that he hadn't meant any harm, and that he was just exhausted from work stress. But his explanations fell on deaf ears. "It doesn't matter who the customer was. What matters is how you treated them," the manager replied. Ethan left the office with a box of his belongings, avoiding the gazes of his colleagues. He felt a mix of anger, regret, and, above all, shame at having his name tied to such a major controversy. However, firing Ethan didn't quell the public outrage. Some argued that the mall was merely trying to appease the crowd without genuinely addressing the underlying issues of customer service culture. Others, meanwhile, defended Ethan, claiming he was just a young employee being scapegoated in a much larger societal issue. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, spent the day reflecting on the incident. She didn't want Ethan to become the victim of blind public outrage. But she also understood that the issue went beyond one individual. It was a manifestation of a larger problem, racism and bias in society, particularly in the workplace. The next day, Kamala decided to appear in an exclusive television interview. The host could barely hide their curiosity as she agreed to address the incident. "How did you feel when it happened?" the host asked. Kamala paused for a moment, looking directly into the camera. "I felt sad," she said, "not because of how I was treated, but because it reminded me that millions of others, people without a voice, go through the same thing every single day." She explained that this wasn't just her story, but a reflection of a society still grappling with unhealed wounds. Firing that employee is not the solution. What we need is education, the cultivation of an environment where everyone is treated equally, regardless of their background or the color of their skin. Kamala's interview quickly became a focal point of public discussion. Millions were captivated by her refusal to seek personal retribution, instead emphasizing the need for systemic change. Ethan sat in his small apartment, a cramped and cluttered space. The TV in the living room was playing Kamala Harris's interview, and he couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Her words echoed in his mind. What we need is education. He thought back to his childhood, growing up in a poor neighborhood where racial biases were deeply ingrained in daily life. He remembered how his parents often made harsh comments about people of color, and how his school friends mocked others simply because they didn't look like us. Ethan realized that part of the reason he had acted the way he did was because he had never been taught anything different. But now, everything had changed. He had lost his job, his reputation, and was facing a major personal crisis. Ethan felt regret, but he didn't know how to make things right. One day, as he was scrolling through social media, Ethan came across an announcement. Kamala Harris was hosting a public forum on racism and diversity in society. He decided he would attend not to defend himself, but to listen and learn. The forum was held at a community center and drew hundreds of attendees. Kamala Harris took the stage and began with a brief but heartfelt speech. She recounted the incident at the mall and explained that meaningful change couldn't happen without everyone's involvement. As the event transitioned to a Q&A session, Ethan decided to step forward. His hands trembled as he held the microphone, but his eyes reflected determination. "Hello, Madam Vice President," he began. "I'm the person who disrespected you at the mall that day." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Ethan, and Kamala was visibly surprised to recognize him. But instead of showing anger, she met his gaze with a calm and encouraging look, silently urging him to continue. "I want to say that I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice unsteady. "I was wrong, and I have no excuse for my actions. But I'm here today because I want to change. I want to learn how to be a better person." Ethan's words sparked a round of applause from the audience. Kamala stepped closer, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Change begins with acknowledging our mistakes. Thank you for having the courage to share this." The encounter became a turning point not just for Ethan but also for everyone present. It sent a powerful message about forgiveness and the capacity for growth. Ethan resolved to join the training programs Kamala introduced, determined to overcome his biases and contribute to building a better future. A few days after the forum, Kamala Harris received an invitation from the management of the shopping mall where the incident had occurred. They hoped to meet with her to find ways to restore their reputation and demonstrate a commitment to change following the controversy. The management felt immense pressure, not just from public backlash but also from their partners and customers. They knew they needed a long-term solution, not just a temporary fix like firing an employee or issuing an apology. Kamala agreed to attend the meeting under one condition. It would not be a blame game but a genuine effort to find real solutions. The meeting took place in a bright conference room with senior executives, a few staff representatives, and a legal advisory team in attendance. "We sincerely apologize for the unacceptable experience you endured," the CEO began, his tone tense. "We've terminated the employee in question and are currently reviewing all of our internal processes." Kamala remained calm but responded with sharp, direct words. "Firing an employee is a first step, but it's not a solution. If you don't address the root causes, incidents like this will keep happening, not just to me, but to others who don't have a platform to speak up." She went on to propose specific ideas: diversity awareness training, conduct regular workshops to help employees recognize and eliminate unconscious biases, changing corporate culture, create a workplace environment that values and respects differences, from hiring practices to customer service, customer feedback channels, establish a system for receiving and addressing customer complaints about employee behavior promptly, community engagement, partner with local organizations to support minority communities and promote inclusivity. The management listened intently. After a 2-hour meeting, they committed to implementing the changes Kamala suggested. Most notably, they decided to host a major seminar on diversity and inclusion, with Kamala Harris as the keynote speaker. The seminar was held a month after the meeting. It wasn't just an internal event for the shopping mall, but a landmark moment that marked the beginning of a broader social movement. Business leaders, politicians, community activists, and ordinary citizens attended the event to hear Kamala Harris's message. Kamala Harris stepped onto the stage to a round of enthusiastic applause. In her speech, she recounted her experience at the shopping mall, not to criticize but to shed light on larger systemic issues. "Racism isn't always about overt words or actions," she said. "It's also about the silent biases we carry unconsciously, shaping how we treat others. But the good news is, This can change. Her speech was not only inspiring but also practical, offering actionable solutions. She encouraged businesses to invest in education, establish clear policies, and measure progress through tangible actions. Diversity isn't just a moral responsibility, she emphasized. It's an economic advantage. When people feel respected and included, they work better, create more, and stay loyal longer. The movement quickly gained momentum. Large companies, including supermarket chains, retail stores, and even public agencies, began to take notice. They joined the effort by organizing training sessions, improving hiring policies, and funding community programs. This event not only sparked significant change but also demonstrated how a single incident could evolve into a powerful catalyst for progress. Kamala's leadership turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth and unity. Meanwhile, Ethan, the employee involved in the incident, was undergoing a significant transformation in his life. After attending the forum where he met Kamala Harris, Ethan decided to enroll in a training program she had recommended. The 3-month course focused on diversity awareness, the history of racism, and building empathy. First, Ethan felt out of place. In the class, he was one of the few who openly admitted to having acted in a discriminatory way. But what surprised him was that no one judged him. Instead, people shared their own stories, the pain they had endured and the biases they had faced. A black woman in the class recounted how she had to change her voice to get hired at a major company. An Asian man shared how he was always treated as an outsider despite being born and raised in the U.S. These stories made Ethan realize that his behavior wasn't just a minor offense. It was part of a much larger problem. Ethan began to change. Little by little, he learned how to listen without judgment, to recognize the unconscious biases he carried, and to question assumptions he once accepted as normal. By the end of the 3 months, he not only understood the gravity of his past actions but also felt a deep responsibility to share what he had learned. Ethan emerged from the program more self-aware and committed to being part of the solution. What had started as a moment of personal crisis had become an opportunity for growth and redemption. The story of Kamala Harris and Ethan became a symbol of change, not just for the shopping mall but for the entire local community. Dialogues, seminars, and training programs helped people not only understand the issue of racism but also provided a space for them to connect with one another. After completing the training program, Ethan decided to join a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping young people build awareness about diversity and inclusion. He became a speaker, sharing his own story to warn and educate others. Kamala Harris, meanwhile, continued to monitor the impact of the movement sparked by her experience. She received hundreds of letters from people inspired by her journey and Ethan's transformation. Many shared how they had changed the way they taught their children, treated colleagues, or even viewed themselves. The community's solidarity extended far beyond meetings and workshops. Local businesses began funding educational programs on inclusion. Schools introduced lessons about the history and cultures of minority communities. These small but meaningful changes gradually created a powerful wave, transforming the entire region. Standing in a packed auditorium at a community event, Kamala smiled as she watched Ethan on stage, sharing his story. She knew that what had started as a seemingly small incident had grown into a movement, one of hope, change, and unity. Despite hosting workshops and committing to policy improvements, the shopping mall's management continued to face pressure from multiple fronts. Loyal customers began demanding concrete evidence of change, while social activists called for greater oversight and transparency in implementing reforms. Emails and letters flooded the mall's inbox, expressing mixed opinions. Some supported their efforts, but many remained skeptical. One letter from a customer read, "Instead of just firing one employee, why don't you publicly share a report on how the mall is actually changing its service culture? We need to see action, not just words." The management realized they needed to do more. A major meeting was convened, attended by diversity and inclusion consultants. During the meeting, the experts recommended specific changes, including establishing a new code of conduct, guidelines that emphasized respect for customers and colleagues, regardless of gender, race, or social class, diverse hiring practices, actively recruiting employees from minority communities to ensure better representation, regular evaluations, conducting monthly surveys with employees and customers to assess improvements in service. While ambitious, these plans brought a renewed sense of hope. The management team understood that they couldn't simply perform for public approval. They needed genuine commitment to restore their credibility. By taking real, measurable steps, the mall began to chart a path toward meaningful and lasting change. As the shopping mall worked to implement change, the local community began to show an unprecedented level of solidarity. Neighborhood groups organized meetings to discuss ways to build a more inclusive society. Small businesses, schools, and even churches joined the movement. A group of local mothers decided to form a club called Teaching Kids Inclusion. They hosted regular sessions where children learned about cultural diversity through storytelling, films, and creative activities. Kamala Harris was invited as an honorary guest to one of these gatherings. Standing before a room full of attentive children, Kamala felt the profound power of education. "You are the future," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Always treat others with kindness and respect. Don't let prejudice cloud your hearts." The movement's spirit of unity didn't stop at the local community. It began to spread across the nation. Major organizations took notice of Kamala and Ethan's story, seeing it as a valuable lesson in the power of forgiveness and transformation. What started as a single incident had become a beacon of hope, inspiring individuals and institutions alike to embrace diversity and drive meaningful change. After completing his diversity awareness training, Ethan continued his journey by participating in community activities. He began volunteering at a nonprofit organization, supporting educational programs for teenagers on breaking down prejudices. One day, Ethan received a special invitation from Kamala Harris. She wanted him to join her in a university forum where the main topic was the power of change and courage. At first, Ethan hesitated. He worried he wasn't qualified to share the stage with someone like Kamala. But she reassured him with simple yet powerful words. "Ethan, your story isn't just about the mistakes you made. It's about how you work to correct them. That is the strength we need to share." At the forum, Ethan stood before a large audience for the first time. He shared his story, from growing up in an environment filled with biases, to the incident at the shopping mall, and finally, to his journey of transformation. His voice trembled at first, but as he continued, he found his confidence growing. When Ethan finished, the auditorium erupted into applause. A young student approached him after the forum, saying that his story had made her realize the unconscious biases she herself had been carrying. Ethan realized that his journey wasn't just about personal growth. It had the power to inspire others as well. From that day forward, Ethan understood that sharing his story was a way to contribute to the greater movement for change and unity. Kamala Harris began receiving thousands of letters from across the country. These letters shared personal stories, experiences of discrimination, and efforts to overcome prejudice. One letter came from a young Latina girl in Texas. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up when my classmates made fun of me because my family doesn't speak English well. I now understand that change begins when we refuse to stay silent." A middle-aged man from Chicago wrote, "I carried so many biases without even realizing it. Thanks to your story, I sat down and had a conversation with a colleague I had always avoided, and I discovered he wasn't so different from me after all." Kamala read each letter with deep emotion. She realized that her story with Ethan had created a ripple effect, spreading far beyond what she initially imagined. She decided to host a gathering where those who had written to her could share their stories in person. At the event, Kamala listened intently, encouraging everyone to continue their journeys. She emphasized, "Every small action matters. When we come together, those actions grow into a powerful movement." Kamala Harris recognized that this story was no longer just about her or Ethan. It was about millions of people fighting to break down the invisible walls of prejudice. With patience, courage, and unity, she knew that a brighter future was possible. With the success of the forums, seminars, and changes in the local community, Kamala Harris realized it was time to expand the movement nationwide. She began collaborating with a team of advisors, social activists, and business leaders to launch a national initiative aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion. The project was named Connect for Tomorrow, with three main objectives: diversity awareness training, providing free courses nationwide, from schools to businesses, to educate people about the history of racism and how to foster empathy, enhancing representation, supporting minority communities in accessing job opportunities, education, and financial resources, community collaboration, connecting organizations, businesses, and individuals to develop sustainable solutions together. At the press conference launching the project, Kamala addressed millions of viewers on live television. This project is not just about breaking down invisible barriers. It's about building bridges between people. We cannot change the past, but we can shape the future. Ethan was invited to join the project as an ambassador. His role would involve visiting schools and businesses to share his story and inspire others. For Ethan, this was a chance to continue making amends for his mistakes and contribute to something far greater than himself. Through Connect for Tomorrow, Kamala and Ethan aimed to spark a national conversation, empowering individuals and communities to work together toward a more inclusive and equitable society. One day, Kamala decided to return to the shopping mall where it all began. This time, she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by Ethan and a group of reporters. The purpose of the visit wasn't just to reflect on the past, but also to see what changes the mall had implemented since the incident. As she walked in, she immediately noticed a completely different atmosphere. The staff had clearly been well-trained to treat customers with respect and professionalism. Banners hung around the mall with messages such as, "Everyone is welcome, no exceptions. Together, we build an inclusive community." A young employee, dressed smartly in uniform, approached with a warm smile. "Hello, ma'am. How can I assist you today?" Kamala returned the smile. "Nothing specific. I just wanted to see how this mall has changed." The manager came out to greet Kamala and Ethan, walking them through the reforms the mall had implemented. From new policies to regular workshops, every step was designed to ensure no one would ever have to experience discrimination there again. Kamala was deeply moved by the transformation. As she looked at Ethan standing beside her, she reflected on the journey they had both undergone. A small incident that had sparked a movement and changed countless lives. A few months later, Kamala was invited to be the keynote speaker at a national conference on diversity and inclusion. The event brought together business leaders, politicians, and social activists from across the country. The central theme of the conference was, "Change begins with the individual." Kamala took the stage to thunderous applause. She began her speech by recounting the story of the incident at the shopping mall, emphasizing that it wasn't just a personal experience but a reflection of a larger societal issue. "What I learned from that experience," she said, "is that we cannot achieve change by simply blaming others. True change begins with looking inward, examining the biases we carry and recognizing the actions we may not realize are hurting others." She went on to share Ethan's journey, highlighting the transformative power of forgiveness and second chances. Ethan is not perfect, but he had the courage to confront his mistakes and commit to change. That's something we all need to strive for. Closing her speech, Kamala delivered a powerful message of hope. We live in a world filled with differences, but it is those differences that make us stronger. Open your hearts and minds to learn from one another. Let's build a world our children can be proud of. The audience erupted into prolonged applause. Kamala's speech quickly became the highlight of the conference, spreading widely on social media and news platforms, inspiring countless others to join the movement for diversity and inclusion. The story ends with Ethan standing in a small classroom, teaching a group of new employees at a retail company. On the whiteboard behind him, bold letters read, "Respect is the foundation of success." Ethan shared his story, from his mistakes to his journey of redemption. The trainees listened intently, many feeling inspired by his words. As the session concluded, a young trainee approached him and said, "Thank you. Your story has made me rethink how I treat others." Meanwhile, Kamala Harris returned to Washington, continuing her work with a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew the journey was far from over, but the small changes she had helped spark were spreading and leaving a lasting impact. Sitting in her office, gazing out of the window, she thought about the steps ahead. A new generation was growing up, carrying values of respect and inclusion. And so, the story doesn't end but opens to a future filled with hope. A future where every individual can contribute to change, no matter how small.